What's up, people? Today we are going to be getting into a very big review that I am excited as hell about. We are going to be talking about Blade Runner, coming up next. Wow. What can I say that hasn't already been said about this movie? Really. I mean, even in the special features that I will be talking about on the review of the disc, I mean, that goes over all of it. I mean, this movie is a classic, and I really can't wait to have a discussion with you guys about this movie because it is that kind of movie. This came out in 1982, and it was an adaptation of Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Now, Philip K. Dick, he wrote a bunch of short stories, so this was actually one of them. And of all of Philip K. Dick's work, Blade Runner is the one that everybody goes to, and it is the one that people crown as the best. Because pretty much when it comes to Dick's work, you have this and Total Recall. Total Recall's good. It's a good, almost classic, almost. But Blade Runner is the crown jewel of Dick's work. Now, right off the top, people, I will just say that I will be reviewing the final cut of Blade Runner only here. So my opinions here only are for the final cut. Because there are actually 3 cuts that I will actually talk about just shortly after this review, and it will just go over the differences between the 3 cuts. So what we basically have here is we are in a dystopian future that is actually set in 2019, so just 2 years away from our future here, and damn, we are going to have a grim 2 years, people, because this future is bleak. The setup for this is told in an opening scroll, and basically what it is there are these robots called replicants. In the actual novel, they are called Andes, but for here, they are called replicants, and they are to represent us, and they are to have skin like us, almost like a Terminator, but instead of not emoting, they can actually emote, and they have a whole lot of feeling, and very strong feelings. They are some rebelling robots. And that's how they are actually designed, or they just are designed to represent us. And we do have feelings, and we do feel, so that is a part of us. But they are essentially used as slaves on other colonies and other Earths, and they are just fighting our wars and basically just doing slave labor on other Earths. But there are replicants that have snuck over to this Earth, and then we have Blade Runners to actually find them. And Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is an ex-Blade Runner that has been put back in the field to actually find a group of replicants that are causing havoc, have actually killed a Blade Runner in the service, and now he is tasked to come back in as a Blade Runner and find them and kill them. This is a very unconventional movie. It is going to have characters that are very hard to relate to. Like Deckard, Harrison Ford plays this character very cold and actually very unlikable. You know, he likes playing scoundrels, but in this movie, he does take it too far. Like, you know, he falls in love with this replicant that goes by the name of Rachel, and Rachel is a very special replicant just because of the fact that she is actually more advanced. They have this test called the Void Comp test, It is a very cool thing to watch, and it is basically a series of questions that are to assess empathy, because the main difference between a replicant and a human is empathy. Replicants or robots have no empathy, and this test seeks that out. And it takes Deckard the longest it has ever taken him to assess that Rachel is a robot, because she has just that much empathy actually in her. Anyway, she leads him onto her, and he just grabs her and just has his way with her to the point where you're kind of like, damn, man. You know, you're Harrison Ford. At this time, he was the most famous celebrity on the planet, and it's a startling thing to see him act that way in a movie, and it's the kind of thing that makes you turn on him. And that is exactly what happens. Deckard is not an easy character to like, but he is our main character. So immediately that sets an odd arc for this movie. You don't quite know who to sympathize with. To be honest with you, the first time you watch this movie, it's hard. This movie wants to challenge you. This movie wants to be provocative. And I feel like until you get to the end, you don't realize who you want to sympathize with. And the people that this movie wants you to sympathize with are these replicants that Deckard is tracking down. And there are 5 of them. The main one is Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer. And Rutger Hauer in this movie is incredible. He displays such emotion as a replicant. It is something that we are not used to seeing, and it is so beautiful. In the end of this movie, I won't give anything away, but at the end, he has a monologue that is so gorgeous and so touching, where he talks about the things that he has seen as a replicant. And just in the short amount of years that he is alive. Because the thing about it is all replicants, or the Nexus 6 replicants, have a lifespan of only 4 years. And that is coming up for Roy and his friends. And they want more life. They want to experience things, and they have already experienced so much. They want to live, and that's all they want. But in this movie, it takes a long time for us to actually get to that point. So until we do, and until he accurately explains himself, I feel like this movie suffers from just us not knowing who to relate to. So what are we left with? Until that point, what are we left with? We are left with some of the most breathtaking visuals ever on film. Ever. I mean, I've watched this in 4K. I picked up the new 4K Blu-ray that I'll be reviewing for you guys soon. And man, is this just a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. For the final cut here, they have tweaked a few things, and it almost has more of a blue hue rather than being so dark. And that is something that Ridley Scott, the director, wanted to do on this final cut, and it just looks so breathtaking. And for a while, the visuals here are what is supposed to be sucking us in and doing a lot of the world building. And there are just odd things with this movie that takes more than one viewing to really understand. Take Edward James Olmos' character of Gaff here. He is an odd duck. He just is. You know, he's got these wrinkles on his face, and I know Edward James Olmos is kind of, wrinkly on his face, like like he is, But not back then, not really. But besides that, there was another thing that was just off-putting me about him, and I couldn't put my finger on it the first 2 or 3 times I watched this movie. He isn't in a lot of it. He just has like 2 or 3 scenes, but there was just something about him that felt off. And then I figured it out. You see, Gaff has blue eyes. And that is very significant because he is obviously from Latin descent, like Edward James almost is, but his eyes are blue, which almost is more American. And that is something that you have to look into this movie on and infer on it and do your research, because the thing about it is his character is supposed to be from multiple different descents, and he wanted that to come across on screen to us, and that is why we have the blue eyes, actually. And Edward James almost wanted to come up with like a street slang talk that is like an amalgam of a bunch of different languages, and it is something that is just very off-putting to see when you first see his character, but it actually fits in this world, because the thing about it is, and I don't really feel like the movie goes into it, but definitely the book does, every character that is left on Earth are on Earth for a reason, and that reason is because there is something wrong with them. Now, Deckard has a very specific purpose, and he is supposed to be a Blade Runner. He's supposed to be hunting these replicants. That is his purpose here. But for the most part, everybody that is left on Earth has some kind of defect wrong with them. And Edward James almost really wanted to play off of that. And there are also other things that want to be said, and you definitely can pick this up on multiple viewings as well, where we have this social structure and a lot of statements being said about the social structure that they wanted for this movie. And it is striking. You know, this is supposed to be Los Angeles, but at the same point in time, you have these images that are going on above you where they are just geishas, and it almost seems like China has actually taken over. You know, that was a fear in the 80s where they had started to take over our markets, and we were afraid of them basically ruling the entire world, and that was a fear in the 80s that they wanted to put into this future, and it is striking. Another way that they want to show the social structure is, you know, you have these cars that are just these hover cars that float in the sky. But at the same point in time, not everybody has them. A lot of people are just walking on the streets because the only people that have them are police or authority. And that is to say that, you know, Big Brother is always watching over you in this future. You know, they have the cars and they have the technology, and that is a deliberate thing that is inserted into this movie that I feel like says so much about this world and causes me to really think about what they are actually trying to say. Now, I don't think this movie is perfect. You know, I said this movie was a classic, but at the same point in time, I said that because a lot of people actually refer to Blade Runner as a classic. It definitely has flaws to me. To me, this is not a movie that I always go back to. This is not a classic movie, but at the same point in time, it is a movie that I truly love. And I just love it because of what this movie actually wants to say, going back to that whole notion where we aren't supposed to relate to this lead character of Deckard. We are supposed to relate to these replicants. Roy. We are supposed to relate to Roy and feel bad for Roy, have sympathy for him. And that is also true for Pris. And Pris is played by Daryl Hannah. She is another replicant that is partnered with Roy, and she wants the same thing, although that Roy, he truly is the leader. He definitely wants to protect Pris. She is just a more simple creation. She doesn't think about things as much as Roy does. She really feels like a hanger-on to Roy. She is just a very simple but lethal character. I won't say how she actually goes out, but the way that she goes out in this movie is so heartbreaking, and it conveys so much emotion in a movie that is kind of cold. This movie is very cold in its characterizations, and the only time that you get emotion is when these replicants they die, and that is just so striking, and it says something to me where you have a movie that's so cold, and that is what they really want to focus on for warmth and impact. You know, to be honest, the first time I actually saw Blade Runner, I did not like it. I found it to be beautiful, but boring, and I didn't know who to root for, because this whole entire time you're following around Deckard, and he is a very cold character. Harrison Ford had done this intentionally, and what that basically leaves us with is a character that I had a hard time sinking my teeth into. But in the end, I found myself really relating to Roy. But at the same point in time, I do think that that's what director Ridley Scott really wanted to do here, and he wanted to create a movie that challenged us to not like the lead character and sympathize with these villains. And so over time, I came to really like this when I figured that out. And I really watched for signs of these replicants doing things that I actually liked them to do now that I knew their motivations. And I found myself really getting into these replicants and into their plight and really sympathizing with Roy especially. You know, Rutger Hauer is amazing in this movie, and he is one of my favorite villains of all time. And wow. So guys, in the end, Blade Runner is a movie that fascinates me, and it just grew on me to the point where even when I didn't like it, I needed to watch it again, and I needed to understand everything that I wasn't understanding. And this movie forces us to meet it at its level and doesn't want to meet us at our level. And it has such striking imagery and social statements to the point where we keep on wanting to come back at this movie, and we keep on wanting to meet it at its own level. And for that, it's incredible. Like I said, Rutger Hauer's Roy is one of my favorite villains of all time, and I absolutely love him. Just the way he howls at Deckard at the end scene is just crazy but incredible and insightful on his part. The movie does leave me a little cold on Deckard, but like I said, that is not the intention here. If you're focusing on Deckard, you are not focusing on the right thing. Focus on the replicants and you will have a better time with this movie. But with that being said, with the whole world that this movie creates and the whole social statement that it wants to say, I will give this a 9 out of 10. It is a really excellent movie, while not being a classic in my eyes. But hey, it is still a great movie. And when I give this a 9 out of 10, I am actually giving it to the final cut, because there are actually 3 cuts to Blade Runner. The original cut, the director's cut, which isn't really a director's cut, it is just something that the studio Fox slapped on to make some extra money, and they did it without Ridley Scott's permission. And then we have the final cut, which is Ridley Scott's final cut. So just to go into the differences between the 2 cuts, the original cut is the worst cut. That is the cut that when the studio saw it, they wanted to dub over it with voiceover, and it was a big contention with Harrison Ford. He did not want to do it, so when he did do the voiceover to explain things to the audience, he did it with the most flattest of readings, just because of the fact that he thought, hey, if I read it like this, they'll never use it. Well, they did. So the voiceover in the original cut, which is the theatrical cut, it is very poorly written. It was not written by the same people that actually wrote the screenplay to the movie. and it is very ham-handed and ham-fisted. It doesn't explain the right things. It explains things that don't need explaining, and Harrison Ford's voiceover sucks, which he knows about it, and they also tacked on a happy ending to the movie that actually used stock footage from the Shining of all movies, when they are driving to the mansion in The Shining and they are looking at the beautiful nature. They actually used some of that in the last scene of the theatrical cut of this movie, and it just says too much. There are certain things that you just need to infer and project onto this movie that a voiceover can't convey, and really, this cut just says too much. So then we have the director's cut, and like I said, it wasn't made with Ridley Scott. He didn't know anything about it, and he didn't actually have anything to do with it. They just slapped that name on this version just to make some extra money. Blade Runner, it didn't make a whole lot of money, but they knew that with the whole new home release market that was out there, they wanted to cash in and make some money with Blade Runner, so they just did the director's cut. They take out the voiceover, they take out the ending. This is a lot better of a movie because of that. But at the same point in time, it is a very dark movie. I will say that there are 3 movies that when they originally came out, they are so dark, I can't see shit. I just can't see. The Warriors is one of them. Escape from New York is another one. And the third one was Blade Runner. And that carries over to the director's cut. So then we have the true director's cut, which is the final cut. This is the newest cut that is out there, and it is actually the best cut to watch. There are some slight differences in the way scenes play out. Pris's death actually plays out a lot better in this cut. I feel like they went and refilmed some things and did some splicing in to kind of make it less of a choppy death so you could see a lot more of it. But the big thing to take away from the final cut is the way that it changes the color palette. It makes it a lot brighter, and you can see a lot more, and it trades a lot of the darker, inkier hues for more blue hues, and it completely changes the look of the movie for the better, and it makes it an even more striking vision. And truly, people, if you have not seen the final cut of Blade Runner, I won't say this a lot, but stop this video right now. You go and watch it. You go. Because, you know what? This is the true version to watch. And I think it's the most accessible, to be honest with you. So there you have it, people. Go pick up the 4K release of the final cut of Blade Runner. I will be right back to review that for you guys in just a couple of days. But until then, I want to know what everybody thinks of this movie. I want all of your theories on this movie. Comment below. Let me know about all of those theories. I want to have a discussion with you guys. And I can't wait to actually review the 4K Blu-ray of Blade Runner, the final cut, for you guys. Stay tuned for that in just a couple of days. I thank all of you for watching so early on. You guys are great. And I will see all of you next time.